In this video, I'm going to show you how to change a string on a violin. The technique is the same for a viola or a cello, and at the end of the video, I will demonstrate the sound of those strings for your reference. For this demonstration, I'm going to change the D string on a half-size violin, and you can identify the size of the instrument by looking inside this hole at the paper label. If this string had broken off short, I might have needed some needle nose pliers or some tweezers to reach in there and get the broken piece out. Now I'm going to remove the D string. I want you to observe that the string goes over the peg, so I'm going to turn the peg backwards while pulling out on it slightly to release the friction of that cone-shaped peg as it's wedged into that hole. I can just pull that right out of there, like that, and the string is free. And then I just unhook the other end from the little hook inside the tailpiece. The type of string I'm using is a Diodario Prelude. You can find these at our local music stores and any online dealer that sells stringed instruments. I've got this D string package open. Down here it indicates the instrument, the D string, and the size of the instrument. So make sure that you specify all that when you buy your string. Now I've got this package open. You can see it's got a coiled up string in the back. I just have to untwist it. I'm going to start by placing the ball end into the tailpiece, which has a little hook there. Now there's room for me to do this from the top on this instrument, but some of them you have to feed them in from the bottom. I get that ball into the little slot, hooked into the little hook, and now I got to keep some tension on it to keep it there. So I'm holding onto the string with my other hand. I'm going to get everything lined up so I can poke that string through the hole in the peg. There it goes, and I poke it through until it sticks out about 1/4 inch on the other side. And I'm turning the peg forward. And I'm catching the string on the end of the peg that's narrower. So I catch it on that side once, and as I bring it around, I catch the protruding string on the other side. So it's kind of sandwiched in between those two wraps of string. And then I'm going to get that coiled up tight so the string's all scrunched together. And I can actually pull the peg out to scrunch the coils of string together, keeping some tension on the string as I turn the peg forward so the string wraps over it. And then once I get it almost all the way down, then I make sure that the string falls into that little groove there. It falls into the little groove there. And now I have very little tension on it because you don't want to tighten it up yet until you know what it's supposed to sound like. So I've got an instrument over here for a reference. Okay, there's the sound of a D. So you have to repeatedly pluck the string as you turn the peg. Otherwise, you have no idea how tight you're making it. So I'm going to demonstrate that a few times. Loosen it up a little bit. Okay, you got a very loose string. Just very, very slowly turning the peg. Going for this sound. See, now I'm there. I'm going to demonstrate that again. Shooting for this sound. Get your reference note from a piano, or you could use a tuner, and you can get tuner apps for your phone even. Also, there are YouTube videos, and I will also give you the reference notes at the end of this video. Now here's another important detail. If one string is loose or out of tune, then they're all out of tune, because as you take the tension away from one string, it actually makes the rest of the strings a little tighter, and vice versa. As you tighten one string, it makes all the rest of them a little bit looser. So once you've got it close, then you have to go back and fine-tune all of the strings to get them all even. Now once you've got your strings tuned pretty closely, Then you're going to fine tune it with the fine tuners. They're just little screws that are in the tailpiece, and like any other screw, you turn it clockwise, it makes it tighter, which will make the string tighter. You turn it counterclockwise, it will loosen, which makes it sound lower. It sounds lower when you loosen the string, it sounds higher when you tighten the string, right? So you'll observe that some of my fine tuners are screwed way down. This one right here is much lower than the others. So that's because, after repeated tunings, you're usually tightening. So eventually you're just going to have to back that thing back up, turn it counterclockwise so it's at normal height, and then go back to the peg and tune it again. And remember, when you are tuning with a peg, it's just wedged in there, so you have to kind of push it in as you adjust it, so that it makes enough friction to keep that peg in there. Another little detail, some strings have a little tube that comes with them. Now you could either, before installing it, you could just slide it off the end, but I leave them on there because they're kind of good to have. If I'm not going to use it, I can always just have it pushed down onto these threads where they're not really hurting anything. But if you can do it, go ahead and install the tubes so that they sit right on top of the bridge, and still fit right into that notch. And notice I've just got them placed so they're roughly centered on the bridge. And what they do is they're useful for making small adjustments in the height of the string, because the height of the string has to be very precise. They soften the tone a little bit, and they keep the string from getting the surface scratched off as you tune it, because as you stretch that string, it kind of drags the string over the bridge. For your reference, here is the sound of each string on the violin. Here's the E string, A string, D string, and G string. For viola, the skinniest string is the A string, D string, G string, and the thickest one, C string. The cello has the same notes as a viola, but an octave lower. Here's A string, D string, G string, and C string. Now, if you have an old student violin that was made around 1970, you might see pegs that have little screws in the ends. Now, these things are a total pain because they work very different from a regular peg. A regular peg is just a cone shape that wedges into a hole. These ones with a screw actually have a screw to squeeze the side of the peg box. And so this screw has to be loosened up a little bit before you can even turn the peg, usually. It just depends on how much tension has been placed on there. So you will have to find a screwdriver that has an incredibly thin tip on it, which is very hard to find. I have found them in small multi-tools and this antique screwdriver that I found in an old house. So they're very hard to get a screwdriver into that slot in the first place. But if you can, you have to loosen that and then get the thing tuned, and then you have to tighten it again. But not too tight, because it still has to be able to move enough to get the tuning exact. So a very tricky peg. Notice also on this old violin, it has two kinds of fine tuners on it. And the concept's the same. It's still just a screw that loosens and tightens the string, but they just have very different hooks on there. And this one happens to have two different kinds, which is odd, but that's just something you might encounter. I hope this video was helpful for you. Just take your time, be careful, and good luck.